Good afternoon, everyone. Just afternoon, 12:01, February 17th, in the year of 2024, the year of our Lord, 2024. How's that? So you really know when you're back listening to this for the 15th time and want to remember, because it's one of your favorites, when that was. So anyway, welcome. Everybody's coming into the room. It's great to see you today, talking about a really complex topic, but I've talked about it many times here, there, and everywhere, MTHFR. And it's really an important topic, and it's very much, well, I would say if this were understood really in mainstream medicine, it would be on the nightly news. It would be in the headlines, because it is so phenomenal when it comes to overcoming so many diseases through the power of epigenetics than is currently realized and practiced in modern medicine. So it's really exciting. It's something I love to talk about. So at first, I'll just take a brief moment to introduce myself. Buckle up, because this is going to be a wild ride. This is a very intense presentation, kind of. It's a lot of technical information. And who knows, maybe I'll split it up and do another week on it. We'll see how it goes. I also really welcome your questions for those of you who are here live. So feel free to interrupt me and ask anything. That's the whole idea of doing something like this in a webinar setting. So please feel free to do that. So I am Rebecca Becky Montrone, grew up here as Becky Wrench in Keene, New Hampshire. Married Dale Montrone, who also grew up here in Keene, New Hampshire. We have a business here in Keene, New Hampshire, called Wondrous Roots. I am a holistic health care practitioner, which means I meet with clients in private consultation for all kinds of stuff. Whatever the problem is, I am willing to tackle it. And I also am an herbalist, so come up with formulas, come from a strong family heritage of compound pharmacy. So I have that, my brain works that way, coming up with ideas for remedies to certain health issues or addressing health in a protective way. And we have a wonderful skincare line, as well as many different formulas that I just, came up with a new one this week. Gee, I don't want to take too much time, but I have a woman who was just diagnosed with a myeloproliferative disease. So if you're talking things like blood disorders, okay, if you're leading to leukemia or any of those, what do I want to say? Multiple myeloma type cancer, that type of a cancer. So I just want to say about that, so anyway, I just found out that she had this. She just found out that she had that. So when I've worked with, this is how my brain works, and this is how I come up with things. What are they doing for those? What are the kinds of things that have to be dealt with in that type of a condition, right? So I found out the the KAB3 pathway, the cat stat pathways, KAT3. And anyway, so some of the natural things that we use that help inhibit that pathway and stop these processes is they use drugs, but the drugs usually always have, very concerning side effects. And not that I'm proposing that she not use the medication she's been prescribed, certainly not. But what I am saying is we can support that. So came up with a new formula this week containing Chinese skullcap, basialan, also green tea, both matcha and green tea. I also have her in this formula, as well as golden seal and Oregon grapefruit, which are berberines. So these are all herbs that interfere with this particular pathway, and that's what the drugs are designed to do, right? So this is what I talk about when I coming up with a formula. This is a perfect prime example. And so in addition, other things are quercetin, which she's already taking. Other things that do this are, again, green tea. So I ordered her a high potency epigallocatechin gallate green tea decaffeinated capsule to add to that. So this is where I come from when it comes to that kind of thing. It's like, wow, what kind of a cancer is this? What kind of a condition is this? What are the things in the natural world that do the same things they're seeking for drugs to do, but in a way that you can use to maybe use instead, especially if you're at a beginning stage of something. Somebody tells you your blood things are off, like in her particular case, her platelets are sky high and her white blood cell count is sky high. If somebody tells you that you're in a pre sort of state, we're watching this kind of thing, just something like this might just do the trick, right? To turn that around, help turn that around. So anyway, that's a good example of that. Okay, so I do that kind of thing. We are located at the Miller Forge building, which is a wonderful old mill building in Keene, New Hampshire, up on the 3rd floor. Our open door business hours are 9:30 to 5, Monday through Friday. The phone number here is 603-439-2603. And you can also reach out to me from either of our websites, wondrousroots.org or shopwondrousroots.com. Go to contact us. Those messages come to my private email, and I'm the only one who sees them, and I will get back to you. Okay, without further ado, so I'm going to do a lot of screen sharing today because I have a presentation that I did, MTHFR, and I'm not going to say much more about it because I'm going to dig in and explain about it as I get into this program, into the presentation. But I was asked to do this for the functional medicine department, part of the residency program at Manchester Hospital in Connecticut back in 2014. And so I'm using that initial presentation, which I've kind of changed just slightly to just update a little bit, but I'm going to do that for you today. It's also in the newsletter. So if you're watching this on YouTube and you're not subscribed to my newsletter and you don't get this information, down at the description on YouTube or Rumble, you will see the link to the newsletter. So you can just click on that. If you want to subscribe to get future ones, just you see instructions at the top how to do that. You can also you can follow along. My whole presentation is there in PDF format, and I'm going to probably be doing it. I probably will do it in PDF because I think if I try to do it in PowerPoint, it might be too much bandwidth. And along with the Zoom. Oh, let me just say something about that. Somebody told me last week she has trouble. They say there's too much bandwidth or whatever, and she has a hard time getting this. So I explained to her that that's on her end. That's her computer, right? So if you're having trouble, watching these types of things, not just mine, but anything like this, you need to shut down other applications, right? So I don't have anything else up right now. I don't have any of my applications open. I just have Zoom. So I'm on Microsoft, right? Because I have Zoom. And then I'm going to open this PDF, but I don't have my accounting system up. I don't have a bunch of windows open on Zoom. So just so you know, if you're having trouble, it might be on your end. Just close out other things and you might find it works better. Okay, so I am going to find my presentation first, and then I will share my screen. Here we have it in PDF form. So anyway, you have this now in PDF form on your computer. You can download it. You can share it with anybody. It's just there, and it's a darn good resource. It really is. So let me do that and go here, share my screen there. And it looks like I'm having a little bit, you probably can hear me okay, but it's so interesting because I just sort of froze, and that was like the bandwidth impact. And I have a really good system. I have a lot of capability here. I have fast internet, and I saw my video like freeze for a second. So just beware. It looks like you can see that because it is circled in green. So I think you can see that. Okay. And then I'm going to make sure I have my chat up. If you want to participate, again, there are a few different ways you can do that. You can type into the chat down at the bottom on your screen. You can, or wherever it is. If I'm sharing my screen, it might be at the top. Mine is now. you can raise your hand. If you raise your hand, I will see that and I will call on you and you can speak. So those are the things. And off we go. Intro to MTHFR. There's just some silly slides in here and there because they asked me to make this, what did they say? Like sort of entertaining because residents are always sleepy. So MTHFR, what is that? Maybe a vanity license plate, right? MTHFR. But no, MTHFR stands for the enzyme that facilitates folate metabolism. So folate is just a B vitamin. It's a B vitamin that we just need a very small amount of on a daily basis, right? That's it. But wow, it has far-reaching effects in our The MTHFR enzyme can be negatively produced by common defects in the gene that produces it. The percentage of our population estimated to have one or more MTHFR defects is between 40 and 60%. But I would seriously say that I think it's much higher than that because over the years, I've looked at hundreds of people's methylation data and only a handful, I could count on the fingers on one hand, have not had MTHFR defect. But again, when I'm usually looking at that, it's because we suspect that might be a problem. So that might kind of change that sort of view. But you see what I'm saying. Anyway, very common. Vitamin B9, let's wait for that to come into focus. Most plentifully found in raw leafy greens. Cooking rapidly destroys folate. And there are over 150 different forms of folate in medicine and in supplements. When we're talking, we think of folic acid, folinic acid, or methylfolate, methyl tetrahydrofolate. Okay. The functions of folate in human physiology are relatively simple, but the implications of their activity and dysfunction can be profound and very far-reaching. So here we have the synthesis of nucleic acids for DNA production and repair and tRNA single carbon metabolism known as methylation, which you've heard me talk about a bazillion times if you've been with me for very long. Intraconversion of amino acids for neurotransmitter production and detoxification. So think about mental health, think about serotonin, think about dopamine, think about norepinephrine, things like that. Formation and maturation of red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelet production. In fact, oftentimes when we see people with blood anomalies, such as what I was talking about before with the CAT3 pathway, that we're talking about problems that originate here, which can be a good thing when you have something that is so incredibly what do I want to say? It's behind so many different things that can be a good thing because it means that addressing one thing addresses a lot of things, right? The root. So, the question, is folic acid the same or at least equal to natural folate? No, folic acid is synthetic. It's used in fortified foods and in a lot of vitamin supplements because it has a long shelf life, right? Because you can't, once you heat folic acid, folate, it is destroyed. That's why fresh leafy greens are a really great source. Salads, fresh leafy greens are a great source of natural folate. It's worthless if you can't break it down into an active form, which is methylated folate. If you have a problem with MTHFR, which I do, and you can't do that. So you're taking all this folic acid, but you're not getting the benefit. And in fact, it can cause problems, which we'll look at very shortly here. Okay. Now, it's hard for us in the United States to get away from folic acid because in 1998, the FDA added a requirement that folic acid be added to every processed bread, cereal, other products that are used with enriched flour. So they, it's basically anything you buy in a package or a bag or whatever. And the reasoning for that was good. The purpose and the intention was excellent. It was, wow, we noticed that when there's a folate deficiency, women can have babies with these neural tube defects. A neural tube defect, as seen in this picture here, where the spina bifida, you've got an opening here in the spinal cord. And really to set this thing off at a high pace, I will tell you about my aunts, and I've mentioned it before. My mother's sister, one of her sisters, found out after being head teller at Bank of Miami for decades, in her 50s, in her late 50s, she started having these little petit mal seizures. They did an MRI and found out that she was born with half a brain. The other side of her brain was a sac of cerebral spinal fluid, and that is a neural tube defect. Boy, talk about touching close to home. But so the idea that the FDA did this was a good idea. But up here, Raymond, you up there in Canada, you don't have to worry about that, because in Canada, they don't require that. And then I just had the label here. You can see that bread here in Nelson, British Columbia, up in Canada, has no folate, but you have folate here in the bread label here. So one of the things we try to do when we have MTHFR defects is to avoid folic acid. Why? And that's because, so what's the big deal, this dude is asking? Folic acid actually competes with natural folate in the methylation pathway. And for some reason, our bodies can't use it. Those of us who have an MTHFR defect, our bodies can't use it. But for some reason, our bodies prefer it, or it takes precedence over. So this is why we have to be sure that we're supplementing with it's pretty impossible to avoid folic acid in stuff that you get at the store completely. But anyway, we have to make sure that we're supplementing with the right kind and enough of it. Okay, so this is my dad, George Wrench. This is a photo of him. I've talked about him many times. He's here at a New Year's Eve party, by the way. This is what he does at a party. Everybody else is like dancing and carrying on, and he's got his headlight on. He's sitting and we're just steps away doing all that stuff. And he's looking at a medical journal. And if you could zone in here, and I do have the actual photograph, this is a molecular diagram of 5-methyl tetrahydrofolate, which is active folate. And it's so interesting because the one heartbreak in his life was that when his wife had Alzheimer's very young, he couldn't figure it out. And this actually is pretty much the figure out, at least in her case. And wow, it was like, this was in 2005. I found out about this when I went to a conference with pharmacist, compound pharmacy buddy, Gene Gresh from Connecticut. We went to a Saturday event down in Boston in 2011. And that's where I learned about this and about glutathione. I had never heard of this before, but here's my dad in 2005. So I'm like, always ahead of his time, but always, I'm sure he was probably sitting there pondering what maybe then he was even thinking of this connection. So anyway, back to folic acid. In recent years has been linked to increased cancer risk. Serum folic acid, not folate, but it's found to be high in people with methylation impairment, a problem that results from, but is not limited to, MTHFR defects. So folic acid, when it's high in your bloodstream, can turn off natural killer cell activity for these small developing cancers. And we can see this here in this metabolized folic acid in plasma is associated with reduced natural killer cell cytotoxicity among postmenopausal women. This study from back in 2006 in the journal, Nutrition Journal, would say about that. Again, we want to keep our folate as much as possible to active forms. We also want to make sure we're using lithium, right? I've mentioned that, and that's not in this presentation, and I didn't know about it when I actually wrote this presentation, to keep that moving out of the bloodstream. Okay. So converting folic acid to 5-methyl tetrahydrofolate, active, the methylated form of folate, requires the work of 2 functioning enzymes, MTHFR and MTHFD1, of which I've heard nothing and know nothing. But MTHFR right there. So if you're blocked in MTHFR, you're X'd out, right? Of being able to do that efficiently. And then you need these other vitamins. So the B vitamins are absolutely huge. Vitamin B2, riboflavin, B3, niacin or niacinamide, vitamin B6, pyridoxine or pyridoxal 5-phosphate, B12, which we have different forms of, and we'll talk more about the important forms to use there. Vitamin C is important, zinc for absorption, and being able to have a good stomach acid for absorption of zinc and vitamins, things like that. But these are, this is the big deal. And again, this affects so many people. So what is methylation anyway? Okay, let's see. All right, Ben Lynch is, Ben Lynch, by the way, those of you who get supplements from me and get recommendations from me, you'll see I use a lot of the Seeking Health brand multivitamins, vitamins, different ones for I have a multivitamin from them. I have 2 forms of B12 from Seeking Health, vitamin D3, K2. I have a magnesium for them, but Ben Lynch, that's his company. And Ben Lynch is a naturopath who's a great resource online, or he's just a great resource when it comes to finding information about this whole topic, MTHFR. And so he's formulated certain vitamin, combinations and things to address these problems. So anyway, Ben Lynch, really excellent resource. Okay, I didn't read that well. So methylation is the act of taking a single carbon and 3 hydrogens, namely a methyl group, and having it attach itself to an enzyme in your body. When this methyl group attaches to an enzyme, the enzyme performs an action. And Debbie just said, great book. So I'm thinking it might be a book by Ben Lynch, Deb. So let me know if that's true and what it is. So we can just share that with people. When this methyl group attaches to an enzyme, the enzyme performs an action, a common action performed by methylation that you can appreciate daily. It's really easy to identify with, is the breakdown of histamine. So a methyl group is made by the methylation pathway, which you have to be able to do that, right? You have to crank these methyl groups out, and finds a specific enzyme to bind to. In this case, the methyl group binds to histamine. When a methyl group binds to histamine, histamine breaks apart and goes away. The book, Debbie says in the chat, by Ben Lynch is called Dirty Genes. Okay. Oh, that's a great title for a book. I love that. I love that. So anyway, everybody out there, Dirty Genes by Ben Lynch. So when a methyl group binds to histamine, histamine breaks apart and goes away. So you can now figure out what happens if your methylation pathway is not producing enough methyl groups. In this case, your histamine doesn't break apart, and thus your histamine levels increase, causing your nose to run and your eyes to itch. That's a very simple, basic, easy to understand example. But then this is like my favorite slide of the whole presentation. I just love that. So anyway, moving on. So I say this, picture methylation as a computer program, like a software program, continuously scanning your computer's hard drive, detecting errors, fragments, fixing, cleaning, and keeping your computer running like a well-oiled machine. That's what methylation does for our DNA, okay? So think about that. When your computer is not running up to speed. You know, you got a lot of junk on here. This got to be cleaned up. You got to just clean out all these fragments, all this debris, and get rid of that. And then things will run smoothly. Like pcmatic.com. And then I found this slide this morning. I added this slide because I think this is important. The role of DNA methylation in cancer. And this is why getting methylation down is so important for preventing cancer. And it says the malignant transformation of normal cells is driven by both genetic and epigenetic changes. The epigenetic changes are what we put into our bodies, or what is put into our bodies that maybe we don't want on the negative side, or what's in our environment on the negative side, or what we put into our environment or our bodies on the positive side. That's epigenetic. That's how we influence our gene expression. This is how we have so much more control than we think we do. With the advent of next-generation sequencing and large-scale multinational consortium studies, it has become possible to profile the genomes and epigenomes of thousands of primary tumors from nearly every type of cancer type. From these genome-wide studies, it becomes clear that the dynamic regulation of DNA methylation is a critical epigenetic mechanism of cancer initiation, maintenance, and progression. Proper control of DNA methylation is not only crucial for regulating gene transcription, but its broader consequences include maintaining the integrity of the genome and modulating immune response. Here we describe the aberrant DNA methylation changes that take place in cancer and how they contribute to the disease phenotype. Further, we highlight potential clinical implications of these changes in the context of prognostic and diagnostic biomarkers, as well as therapeutic targets. This is kind of where the whole thing goes, right? This is why they're saying, oh, we're going to find out what your cancer's DNA is. And they're trying to look for different treatments for different cancers based on the genome. And but we can, in the big, larger picture, we can just go right after that in our daily lives using simple, easily obtainable nutrients to really head that off at the pass. Head that off at the pass, best case, before you ever come close to developing cancer. So exciting. This is like so exciting. And honestly, the fact that this is known and that everybody doesn't know it, that your doctors don't know it, and I'm not criticizing your doctors. It's just the way the whole system is set up. It will take years. It takes years for stuff to be known, but that we can have so much control over our destiny when it comes to our health right now, right this very minute, should be headline news. It should be, it is so freeing. It is so wonderful. And that's why, that's my passion in sharing this information, getting it out to myself, benefiting from it from myself and my family and for you. One of the most important successful results of methylation is the raising of glutathione levels. The tripeptide glutathione is the most potent catalyst of programmed cell death to mutant cells, commanding them to die before they can reproduce and make more like their slimy cells. And so it's just so true. And again, Debbie's saying, so doctors don't do little about MTHFR. They really don't know. And if they do know, what they know is this, that it can have an influence on cardiovascular risk, right? Because that's all they're taught. So, and I'll be getting into that. And yes, glutathione totally depletes as we age. So I love this. Here you've got a renegade cell here, and he's biding his time there with sweating bullets because he can see that his time is up because glutathione has actually raised P53, tumor suppressor gene. And this is like that old game, Mousetrap. I love that game. Boom, and the dynamite goes off and he's gone. That's apoptosis. That's my kind of medical diagram. Very easy to understand. And then I say, think of methylation as fairies with wondrous wands that create things like neurotransmitters and then go about zapping them to life. So this is the deal. People with MTHFR defects often suffer from things like depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, OCD, eating disorders. Pharmaceutical drugs are prescribed for these things. And pharmaceutical drugs can have their place. However, if they don't have the raw material to work with, they are very limited into the extent to which they can be of help. A perfect example is a SSRI inhibitor. So selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, such as Zoloft, Paxil, Prozac. They work to keep whatever serotonin you have available active longer. They don't do anything to help you make more serotonin. This has to be done here in the back end. This is where this happens. So you don't have anything here to work with. And so the drugs don't work as well, or they'll work for a short time, but then their time is expended. And that's sort of where we got the diagnosis of bipolar type 2. So bipolar, we normally think of as a manic depressive disorder, right? Where you have very severe lows of depression, and then you have these high manic phases where you can conquer the world. But there's something that's been called now bipolar 2 disorder, because it doesn't respond to the normal things that would a unipolar depression disorder, such as just major depression. So they're like, well, it doesn't really respond, so we're going to use what we use for manic depression, and that's like a psychiatric, a anti-seizure drug, right? So, but this is the deal. If you are using an SSRI for somebody with a unipolar depression, it may not continue to work. And it's just because they're not because the person is not making the neurotransmitter to begin with. So that's really, really key. And again, how exciting is this? We just talked about cancer. Now we're talking about mental illness, so-called mental illness. And we're looking at the same root. We're looking at the same thing to get at the underlying things here, down deep, down at the very, very deepest root. And that's exciting because that's within our power to do. So functions of methylation, we turn on and off genes, gene regulation, process chemical and toxins, build our neurotransmitters, process hormones. Very, very important. And there are other genes, and I'll get into this towards the end, talking about catecholamine transferase. There are other genes that actually interact with MTHFR to also affect methylation. So MTHFR is one, but there are other genes that impact methylation, and that's where it's really great. And when I get to work with people and understand that better, we can see just how to more finely tune and tweak, but the underlying things are always the same down at the base. Process hormones, so estrogen. So people with a catecholamine transferase, and Debbie is saying again, she is positive for COMT. So catecholamine transferase is and histamine, but COMT is very important for breaking down estrogen. So we can see people who have COMT defects, catecholamine transferase defects, and say that they have. We have to make sure that they're breaking their estrogen down, because we might be more likely to see problems with cancers that are estrogen related, such as breast cancer, ovarian cancer, endometrial cancer, that kind of thing, or in guys, prostate cancer. Build immune cells. So our immune system is hugely important here. Your T cells and your NK cells. And these are the things that were affected by the vid injections. Now I have to be careful with my words here. We have to be very careful about these kinds of things are super important. This is why, everybody who's had those treatments, who comes to me, I make sure they're getting that I make sure everybody who comes to me is getting this set off, right? But making sure their glutathione is in there. We're putting these things back into where they're supposed to be and how they're supposed to be functioning. DNA and RNA synthesis, producing energy, your coenzyme Q10. This is your ATP, your adenosine triphosphate, your mitochondrial energy, which is that is life's energy. That is your most basic biological energy. And then producing protective coating on the nerves, myelation. So very, very important for things like, preventing things like MS. Okay, moving on from there. Okay, so let's just take a look at this. I'm going to read through this list because you're almost like, well, what isn't here, Becky? I mean, diabetes. These are some of the conditions that can be related to undermethylation and MTHFR defects. And just think about you, think about your health, think about your family's health, think about your ancestors' health. Diabetes, cancer, pulmonary embolism, cleft palate, autism, Parkinson's, neural tube defects, atherosclerosis, right? Hardening of the arteries, immune deficiency, ADD, ADHD, multiple sclerosis, Alzheimer's, dementia, chemical sensitivity, congenital heart defects, fibromyalgia, depression, alcoholism, addictive behaviors, insomnia, Down syndrome, chronic viral infection, thyroid dysfunction, neuropathy, migraine, recurrent miscarriages, infertility, anxiety, schizophrenia, bipolar depression, eating disorders, OCD, allergies, asthma, psoriasis, Crohn's disease, IBD, celiac disease, gluten intolerance, and other food intolerance. It's huge. This sounds like, the lineup for people going for their doctor's appointments this week here locally in town. This sounds like every, people somebody with all of these things, right? Probably pretty close to it. So there are more than two, but there are two most common and most identified. And I've seen two people in my whole history with each having something that's like not either of these and not the same, that there was very little known about. But unfortunately, in those people, they also had a one gene defect in each of these, which is not great. But anyway, common defects, 34 rare defects. Okay, so the number just indicates where they are on the gene strand. That's just their location along that gene, the MTHFR gene. The C677T defect, and this is the one that your average doctor, if they're in the know at all, will be aware of. And this is, they'll just say that it's MTHFR. They'll say you might have a more propensity to have cardiovascular disease if you have this. So this is the elevated homocysteine. Homocysteine is made during this process of, and I meant to tuck my little diagram in there, but I didn't have time and I didn't do it. But where we start with, oh gosh, I almost wonder if I could, I'm not going to try, risk it. I was going to draw it on my whiteboard. I've got a sketch program that I should be able to just do this when I'm doing it. And Raymond did that, but anyway, I can't do it now because I just don't have time, but I'll do it another time. But anyway, homocysteine is made in the process of metabolizing sulfur, which is what this all comes down to. And then homocysteine is broken down. Remember last week, if you were here or if you listened afterwards, I talked about glycine and how glycine is another way we can break homocysteine down. Homocysteine is an amino acid that's created in the process of sulfur metabolism, by which we make glutathione eventually. But homocysteine needs to be broken down. Otherwise, it can cause your blood to become thick with fibrin. And so that's why it can cause an increase in heart disease, increased stroke, increased deep vein thrombosis, peripheral neuropathy in your limbs, placental vascular problems, like, for instance, little blood clots forming between the placenta and the uterine lining and pulling that away, or preeclampsia in late pregnancy, neural tube defects, cleft palate, that kind of thing. So not everybody with these defects is going to experience these things. And there are other defects, believe it or not, that will bring homocysteine levels down. Glycine brings homocysteine levels down. Methionine synthase brings homocysteine levels down. But anyway, that's the big deal here. with that one, but also found in some cases to strongly correlate with C677T are psychiatric conditions such as schizophrenia, depression, bipolar disorder. And then it's just a slide like of a paper like talking about that. This meta-analysis demonstrates an association between MTHFR C677T variant and depression, schizophrenia, and bipolar disorder, raising the possibility of the use of folate in treatment and prevention. And this was published back in 2006. Where are we? We're almost 20 years out from there. Wow. It's sickening when you think about it, right? Because this isn't new news. Okay, now this one, A1298C defect, some prominent features. Now this is the one that I have, and I am, and I'll get into that in a second, I'm homozygous, which means both I inherited a defective gene from each of my parents. Depression, anxiety, IBS, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, migraine, dementia. My mother had Alzheimer's at 49. Well, that's when we first noticed it. Nerve pain. She had extreme nerve pain in her feet 10 years prior to that, that nobody could ever figure out. Brother with schizophrenia. Parkinson's and BH4 problems, and I won't get into that, but that's a B12 kind of thing. And guess what raises BH4? Lithium, trace mineral lithium, lithium orotate. See how intricately, isn't this fascinating? It's all very related. So my mother also suffered severe depression. Yeah, and Debbie's asking, can you explain heterozygous and homozygous? And that's the next slide, Debbie. So I will get right there. She had, anyway, you see things in here like I've never experienced in my life, right? I've never had a migraine. I would say I've had some anxiety, but, I get rid of caffeine and alcohol and I have none. I do have some slight, that I've had for years, just some slight fuzzy sock feeling on my toes. But other than that, I've been doing well. And I was not a really healthy kid, which just goes to show, again, the power of epigenetics. I had severe constipation as a child. We have that. I had severe chronic UTI as a small child. And I have none of those problems. And I haven't for decades. So this is just really, really wonderful. So anyway, both problems don't clear heavy metals well. Symptoms, I guess it isn't my next slide. How do I know you have this defect? I'm going to show you. It's been tested, and I've got my data up there, and I've got my daughters too. So I'm going to be getting there. Okay, so we don't clear heavy metals well. That's the whole thing too with the inoculation problem in children. Symptoms tend to worsen over time. Cancer risk increased, renal failure, addiction potential to drugs and alcohol, to video games, to pornography. Just this is it's a neurotransmitter problem. And so here we have the heterozygous. This was Debbie was asking, the plus, minus, and the plus, plus. This would be a plus, minus. And she's got it in the chat. If you're looking at the chat, she said, will you explain plus, minus? And she says, her daughter is that, but she is plus, plus. So heterozygous means one of the gene pair is affected. Your methylation rate drops down to 55 to 70% of normal. Homozygous defect, which Debbie is and which I am, both genes are affected. Methylation drops down to 7 to 10% of normal. So that's very severe. Now, this one is considered the worst. And this is called compound heterozygous. This is inheriting one defective gene, the plus minus in both C677T and A1298C. That means the symptoms of both defects are present, can be present. The symptoms more severe, blood clots are more prevalent. 98% of autistic persons tested are positive for this. And this is, again, we see Julie Gerberding actually admitting on CNN way back in 2008 that the inoculations can trigger autism in certain vulnerable subset of children. And this is that. Why? Because they don't make glutathione and they can't get rid of all of the toxins in those things that are shoved into their bodies in these inoculations. So it's a crime. But if that's all been debunked, right? Yep, that's all been debunked. Okay, now I want to, because Karen asked this question, I'm going to run down through here. I'm going to show you mine. We can go back, and you can always go back too, but we can go back as time allows. We've got a good 15 minutes, so I think we're doing pretty well here. So this is my methylation data. Right here in the red, you see, this is my MTHFR A1298C. The red is a plus, means I have a gene defect in both. This is my monoamine oxidase. It's a gene, okay, so I have a block there. So I do really well using things like GH3, which are what I want to call reversible MAO inhibitors. Very, very kind of nice. And that's another topic for another day if you're ever have that interest. You'll see here, I don't have any of the COMT, the catecholamine transferase blockage here. So that's really good. I also don't have anything in the C677T. I do have down here in CBS, I'm double blocked. CBS, that can also have an effect on different things with vitamin B12 and everything, but it also provides another way for homocysteine to be broken down because of its upregulation. So anyway, some defects correct other defects. But here's the deal. Now, my daughter, and I've told you this about her when I was pregnant with her. Well, what got me excited about doing this in the first place? I was 16 years old and I read my mother's copy of Adele Davis's Let's Have Healthy Children. She was a biochemist and she worked many different capacities, but she was a nutritional advisor for ranchers. And she noticed that ranchers took a lot more care with the prenatal diets of their cattle than did your average pregnant woman. And she went on to write how nutrients affect the constitutional development, the constitutional health picture development of a baby preconception and during pregnancy. And she had this program to follow, and I followed it to a T. And people who knew me then will just laugh thinking about it because I drank a quart of Pep Up every day with brewer's yeast and blah, 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 blah. I took so many nutrients that I was, people thought I was going to give birth to a monster. But my daughter was everything Adele Davis said she should be with her health when she was born. She did not have health problems. She did not have allergies. She's never had strep throat, never mind tonsillitis. She's 35. She didn't, she had the bone structure that Adele Davis said she should have, not needing braces and things like that because the teeth had, anyway, it all was great. So I never thought much about this. So finally, a few years ago, Krista gets around to doing her 23andMe. And that's how we found this information out, by the way. So we did 23andMe genetic testing. So they send you a kit and you spit into the tube and they send you back information. You can also do it with Ancestry.com. And what I want to say is right now, I need the raw data to get a chart like this from 23andMe, and they're no longer releasing the raw data. Ancestry.com is. So if you have not done this and you want to do it, don't go to 23andMe, go to Ancestry.com, because then I spin it up into this geneticgenie.org and for the methylation profile. And that's where I can get these SNPs. And that's the part that I want to look at. So anyway, Krista does this and she says to me, well, it looks like I'm pretty healthy, except it says I might have more blood clots. And I was like, what? I'm like, wait a minute. Because I know that's C677T and I'm A1298C and no 677T. So she has to be A1298C too. Or I would think she would be. I don't think she would absolutely have to be. But I'm like, oh my gosh. And I look. And Krista, and I called her this morning, by the way, before I did this, because I did not have this in my data before for her. I had somebody else's data here in my original presentation, and I took it out because this is now published online. And I asked Krista, and she said, oh, yeah, you can do whatever you want. But anyway, oh, here she is. She is compound heterozygous. Krista is the worst. She is considered the worst MTHFR defect. She has a 1 gene defect in both A1298C and C677T. And she's blocked like here in catecholamine transferase, which can also cause problems because these people have a harder time breaking down certain neurotransmitters such as dopamine and norepinephrine. And so you can end up there with anxiety, panic attack, kind of things like that. And she has experienced some of that from time to time. It certainly is not debilitating and certainly nothing that's been, terribly obstructive in her life. But you can see that kind of thing. But here, really beautiful health throughout her whole growing up and everything. And these are the people, when I see people with this defect in my practice, these are the people with severe, very severe health problems usually. That's the power of epigenetics from the womb. That's incredible. When you think about it, we have so much more control than we think we do. I always say, yes, we do. I had no idea what I was doing. That was God. That was, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding, in all your ways acknowledge him and he'll direct your paths. And that doesn't mean if you've suffered illness that you weren't doing that. But I'm just saying, this was force. This was like just a beautiful beginning of this revelation of the power of all of this in my life. Because I have told you, and I am absolutely sure I should have full-blown Alzheimer's disease right now. If God was not showing me along the way how to thwart this. And it was even before I knew about glutathione and the whole unfolding of this because of other things that I was doing that affected those things, such as 5-HTP, such as DHEA, such as other things. And that all play into this. And so this is exciting to think how many people out there, maybe you, are thinking, there's nothing I can do about this. Look at this. Everybody in my family has cancer. It's probably just going to happen to me. And you're just waiting for that other shoe to fall. You're just like, what can I do? That's just the way it is. And nobody's been able to escape it. No, that's wrong. And if you are just starting your family, get on it. Get taking care of yourself properly and eat and do, I just ordered, I constantly order copies, and they're out of print, of the 1972 edition, which I read, of Adele Davis's Let's Have Healthy Children. And I paid like $59 for it on Amazon because it's used, and there's very few of these in print. And I just promised to loan it to a woman who's newly pregnant. And I give these out and I just say, keep it, but I can't anymore because I don't know if I'll ever be able to continue getting them. I have earlier copies, and they've since come out with later renditions after she died, and then they dumbed down everything. They took all her vitamin doses and dumbed them down. So it's not even her speaking. But, preconception and prenatal diet and things, and glutathione is huge, both for egg quality and for a healthy pregnancy. Of course, I knew nothing about that then, but I was doing things according to her. I was helping raise my own ability to do this when I was pregnant. I was taking 5 milligrams of folate a day, which is a lot. Okay, so now what I want to do is, I talked here, we've got about 5 minutes left, and I would say, okay, so Debbie's got a lot of stuff in there about TRS. You can check your brain wiring with neurofeedback testing. This is Debbie's daughter, Madison. And there's a site you can upload to. Forget it. Madison is the same as her. Okay. Anyway, I'm not sure, but I can pass this information on. Debbie can get in touch with me later with things. And next week I can just include links of that stuff. So thanks, Deb, so much for that. Okay, so we talked about that. So I'm going to go now. I'm going to go to, and I'm going to stop this. I'm going to stop my share for a second. And I'm going to instead open up my newsletter briefly, just so I can kind of go through a basic protocol. And for those of you who are already working with me, and, you know, this is like, people are like, well, do you put everybody on this? You know, do you put everybody on glutathione? Do you put everybody on, you know, it's almost like, well, just come to me for whatever and you get the same thing. Well, that's not really true, but you do get the same base things. And that's because I just assume that everybody has a methylation problem. If I don't know it, I just kind of assume it because so many people do. And there's no harm in assuming that, because we're just making sure we get certain things in that are of the right kind that your body can use properly. So let me just go here, be right there. Okay, and then share my screen again. Okay. All right, so here we have, we talked about all of that. Down here, here's where you can click on the presentation and get the whole thing yourself. You can go back and review it, whatever. And then here, this is you can click on these things and actually see the products right here. Okay. And then just do this. You can click here to get the actual page as a PDF with the hyperlinks as well. So I say this is a Wondrous Roots very basic MTHFR protocol. But if you're just like, you're out there and like, I just want to make sure I'm covering the bases at the very root level, this is terrific. I mean, this is great. So you go to acetylglutathione. Acetylglutathione, the acetylated form, is the form that is best absorbed in the body. Reduced glutathione, forget it orally, it's worthless. The Dirty Genes book is great to coincide with all of this. Yeah, that's good. I'm going to get that book. Sorry, Dale, one more book. Find a place to put. And then, so we say 150 milligrams to 50 milligrams body weight. So you would just decide. Most adults I have on 300 milligrams a day. If you have cancer, I have you on double that or maybe more than that for a while. So it depends, but you want to, as a basic, I want to be making sure I'm getting glutathione and I'm bringing that up because that's the whole idea of this working properly. Is the great grand result is that you make glutathione. And this is the form that is better absorbed than IV glutathione, longer lasting in the body. And it is just the way to go. It has a long half-life, about 36 hours it's active in the body. It's just great. The Thorne Basic Nutrients, 2 per day. So that's the multivitamin that I use. Why? Because it has active form of folate. It has a methylated form of folate. It has a methylated form of B12, 600 micrograms. It also has other things I like in there for different reasons, 200 micrograms of selenium. It has 2,000 international units of vitamin D3 in the K2. So there's a reason I prefer that. But that's why a lot of times when people come to see me and they're like, well, I'm taking Centrum, I'm taking Rainbow Light, or I'm taking something like that, or it could be a good vitamin. I always check what form of, do we have active forms of folate, B12? And then the other problem is some people do not have, they have a sensitivity to the methylated forms of B12 or folate, even though they need them. And Ben Lynch talks about that quite a bit. And so he makes a supplement called Optimal Multivitamin. Oh yeah, it's a typo. It's a typo. It's 50 pounds body weight. So I'm sorry about that. 50 pounds body weight. Yeah, I was doing this like probably right before I released the newsletter today. So, okay. So 50 pounds body weight. So he has a multivitamin mineral with active forms of folate, but they are not methylated, and B12, but not methylated. Then I always suggest that people do an additional B12 lozenge, either hydroxy or adeno B12, because everybody tolerates these well, and because not everyone absorbs B12 through the gut. So some of us don't make intrinsic factor, and we're not sure if we do or we don't. And so to make sure that we're getting it, something that just goes under the tongue and it goes right into our bloodstream. So those are kind of the foundational things. Then, of course, if I were to elaborate on that, I would say lithium orotate at night to make sure you're getting your folate and your B12 out of the bloodstream. And I probably should have put that in the basic, but these are the basic things. The reason that these are fine, and I didn't mention the other B vitamins, right? Because in these multivitamins, the whole B complex is there. And that's certainly important. The B6, the B2, the B1, the B3. But those are all present there. So always tell people will come in and say, well, I just really want to take glutathione. And I will say, makes more sense. All right, what was I just saying? Because I just was looking at the making more sense about what Raymond was saying about anyway. So lithium would make a good difference there. Okay, so yeah, people will ask me, now I remember, I just want to take glutathione. Well, number one, we don't, because glutathione is going to detoxify your body of of toxic metals, right? Mercury and aluminum and cadmium, but it can also lift some good minerals, minimally, but you want to make sure you're getting your trace minerals back in there as well. You need these are cofactors, are all of these B vitamins, and in the right form with glutathione. So we don't just take glutathione and neglect a good multivitamin mineral. And so again, and a good multivitamin mineral are the ones, that's why I'm very picky with my multivitamin choices. So, oh, that's good. I'm glad Marilyn, that you pointed that out, because now when I put this up on YouTube, I can make that little adjustment, and I can't make an adjustment, but I can make a note in the description to make that, and then I'll correct it in my files. Wow. Well, this is a lot. This was a lot. I guess, my final, summary of this is great information. This is such powerful information to have. And you will readily see, and I'm sure you have, if this is new information to you today, that in your own life, you're like, oh, or somebody, whether it be a friend or a relative or whatever, just putting those puzzle pieces together. Why? And sometimes it's just super validating too. I have this health problem, which maybe it's a health problem you have, or somebody with a strong stigma attached to it, such as schizophrenia or bipolar disorder. Not that there ever should be stigma attached to those things, but there is. And you're like, wow. I wouldn't say that you shouldn't take any med or supplement without knowing your status of MTHFR, or a lot of people wouldn't be doing that. But I would say knowing your status of MTHFR is very important. Again, I just assume every single person I work with, I assume has an MTHFR status that is not working properly. So everybody I work with, for whatever reason, I don't care if you came to see me and your main problem was, a skin rash. I will, in the base things that I put you on, I will assume that. And I will assume that you don't do that well, and make sure that you're getting nutrients to get around that. So we learn our status through DNA testing. Yes. So again, it's very complicated if you try to, get your DNA and try to look for all of those SNPs on your own. That's why I love geneticgenie.org. So again, if you're going to do this and you want to do DNA testing, I recommend you use Ancestry.com right now, because you can get the zip file, download the DNA, raw DNA. Then I take the zip file, or you can take the zip file and upload it to geneticgenie.org. And in a matter of seconds, you will get the printout like you saw of mine and my daughter's, detailing those SNPs that have to do with methylation. From catecholamine transferase to the vitamin D receptor genes to monoamine oxidase and the MTR and MTRR, which I also was blocked in, by the way, which makes MTHFR worse. And so that's how we do it. Yeah. So anyway, I thank you all for being with me today. It is 1:06, so I need to let you go. But feel free to shoot me questions. You can message me on my website or email me. A lot of you have my email address, and we can always go over questions during the first part of next week's program. I'd be delighted to do that. So let's just plan to do that. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I appreciate their participation. I hope you've learned a lot. And thank you, everyone. Take care and have a really great weekend.